Hello friends, welcome to this episode of SelfKind with me, Erica Webb, for a Tuesday tidbit. And this tidbit is brought to you by my glitching mobile phone. I have had this phone for nearly 3 years, and so of course it's starting to do some strange things, and it got me thinking about an interesting analogy with self-care. And so that's what we're going to dive into. So we all know this problem, right? You have a phone for long enough and it starts to do some strange things. I mean, even when you haven't had it for that long, phones and technology tends to do some strange stuff that we might just be like, why are you doing this? Now, it's funny, we've gotten to a point with technology that we just expect it to function really well all of the time. And so when these things happen, it can be incredibly annoying. But the thing that I want to point out with this analogy is the way that when we have a computer kind of do a weird thing or our phone does something funky, we usually have some go-to methods for dealing with it, right? We might turn it off and on again because that often works. Or we'll be like, maybe my system needs a software update. Or like the other day I was in Instagram and it just kept doing really weird stuff. And I was like, you know what, maybe this app has an update that I haven't installed. And so we have these ways of being like, hang on, there might be a solution to this that I can look to use. Our first thought isn't like, well, this is a broken piece of rubbish. I just, throw it out. We might get to that point after a while, but for the most part, it isn't our, we don't assume that it's broken. We're just sort of like, well, hang on, maybe there's something that I haven't considered that I need to pay attention to. So kind of like think about that through the lens of our own bodies and the way that we think and our self-care practices. We have this way of thinking that when we fall off the supposed wagon, FYI, there is no wagon, but when we fall off or when we kind of maybe are working towards something new, like practicing self-compassion, building up a movement routine, something like that, and we don't do it, or we kind of like slip back into our old ways of thinking or moving or doing things, we tend not to give ourselves the same credit that we give to our devices, right? We think, I'm just bad. I'm just bad. I'm just a bad person. I'm not cut out for this. I'm hopeless. We have all of those thoughts. Instead of, what's the equivalent to the software upgrade or the app update or turning the phone off and on again? That's our self-care. The rest, the pause, the movement, the reaching out for support, the recognition that I am not broken. But I might need something that I'm not currently getting or experiencing or taking in order for this to feel possible. And I think that this comes up a lot when we're thinking about changing the way that we think, right? When we're thinking about changing the way that we think, that all sounds very meta. But this idea of when we're starting to meet ourselves with more kindness and more compassion and we're shifting our relationship with ourselves, we will very often slip into other, older, more habitual ways of thinking. And that is normal. Just like our devices cannot work at 100% all of the time, we can't expect to be practicing a new skill and to be perfect at it from the first day. Probably we will never be perfect at it, right? We're not going to hit this point where it's like, well, that's just my new normal. It might be our new normal to do it the bulk of the time, but we're probably not going to be in a position where we just suddenly live this life where things go exactly to plan and we always meet ourselves with the kindness and compassion that we desire. Sometimes we will find that inner critic piping up again and being like, hey, look at what you're doing now. And so this idea of pausing to ask, what might I need? What's the equivalent of that check in with the technology that I can give myself to recognize that this is actually really normal. This is actually totally okay. What if I took this perspective of what do I need? How do I need to be supported? How does that change our relationship with ourselves? So just a little tidbit for your Tuesday. Hopefully that gets you thinking about this in a slightly different way. It's not a new message, but I guess a slightly different way of thinking about it. So I hope it's helpful. As this episode is coming out, it is Tuesday, because it's a Tuesday tidbit, and it's Tuesday the 31st of October, which means it's also Halloween, so boo. We have, as this comes out, one more day to register for SOMA Home, the first round of SOMA Home. So I want to just spend another minute or so just talking about that in case it's something that has been on your radar and you haven't yet signed up and you're like, oh, I must remember to do that. SOMA Home is my brand new 6-week program that is all about kind of finding a sense of home within yourself, which is essentially what we've just been talking about today. And like the tools that we use to come back to that time and time again, and really getting to the bottom of and the heart of why showing up for your own needs can sometimes just feel so hard. And getting to the heart of that and then having ways to move beyond it. This is about learning to really understand what it means to listen to your body, to be in a friendship with yourself rather than feeling like you're kind of constantly combating your body. And we start on the 6th of November, but registration closes tomorrow on the 1st of November. So if you're listening to this right as it drops, you've got probably, 24 hours or something. I'm closing registration at 8 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time on the 1st of November. And the reason for sort of shutting it before we start, a few days before we start, is because I've got some admin stuff that I need to do behind the scenes to get everybody set up. So that is why. If you're wondering, there's a few days in between. It's because I've got a little bit of work that I need to do in between. And so that just gives me a little bit of breathing room for that. So if you are interested in joining us, this first round is at a very special, very discounted rate. And I would love, love, love to welcome you in. You can find out more information via the link that I'm going to pop below in the show notes or in the description if you're watching on YouTube. But please, if you've got questions, just email me or find me over on Instagram. You can DM me there. As I said, right up until 8 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time on the 1st of November is when you've got to register. It is going to be amazing. I am really excited about this program. I just can't wait to start. I think it's going to be a massive transformation for the people that join. And very realistic too, right? I'm not going in there saying this is going to be, the quick fix to anything. Nothing, it's not a quick fix. We're going to go deep. It does require some willingness to look at yourself with kindness and compassion, but look at yourself with honesty as well around some of the ways that you're thinking and some of the, and sort of starting to question some of that stuff that perhaps is a little bit automatic at this point. So head to the link if you are curious about joining us. If you're listening to this after the fact and you're like, I missed it, but I'm really interested and keen, still that same link you can go to and it will have information to join the waitlist for the next round, which will be running probably in February 2024. All right, I'm going to leave it there because this is a tidbit and we don't want to go too long. So I hope that is a helpful analogy. I hope you have a wonderful week. I will be back on Thursday with another episode and I will look forward to talking to you then.